culture has been this John Wayne ruggedness, particularly with men, maybe so more so than women. And to admit that I may be not feeling well in general, even physical illness, for a man to say I'm sick, it's difficult.
The context of our faith walk, you know, this notion of not having prayed enough or having sinned or just pray your way through it continues to be a dominant theme. If you're not careful, it keeps you from getting the kind of help that you need. And so when you take a look at places where there's high levels of poverty, where you have people who are people of color, and then further, kind of disaggregating it into black communities, you've got access as an issue.
16.5% of U.S. youth aged 6 through 17 experience a mental health disorder. That data goes back from 2016, approximately 7.7 million people. 50% of all lifetime mental illness begins by age 14 and 75% by age 24. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 34. And all data suggests that amongst Black youth that rate is steadily increasing. Clearly, this is heartbreaking, concerning, but the question I have for the both of you is, what role do you think the society we live in today contributes to the impact it has on adolescents and young adults, right? When you think about video games and different things of that nature, how is that contributing to the increase and really suicide being the second leading cause of death for that demographic? But then to further dig deeper, why is it impacting Black youth at such a high rate?
Reverend, it makes me it brings to mind for me this whole healing frame that you and I have talked about that I think has more and more value. When you are talking about post-traumatic stress disorder, that's almost episodic. So maybe you can use a clinical approach to deal with that. Dr. Shinwright's work on healing says there are communities and families and children who live in communities where it's never post-traumatic. It's ongoing traumatic stress. So he calls it persistent traumatic stress environment or persistent traumatic stress experience. In those circumstances, and this again goes back to our conversation about structural racism, because this was organized to happen this way, that certain folks have access to housing and others don't. That certain folks have access to healthcare and others don't. So when you don't value communities where young people live, and we tend not to value those communities as well as others, and you don't value the people who live there, particularly the young folks who may not be voters yet, right? They may not be adding to society the way that you think adds to society because they're not big earners yet, right? So you don't value them as much. You may talk about it, but in real terms, in real time, they don't get the resources that they need.
Right.
They're dealing with that ongoing, persistent traumatic stress, and they are being destroyed by it. And so the overstimulation of the amygdala gland, because they're in constant fight or flight or freeze, wears them down. So they end up with a sense of hopelessness, helplessness, and what the literature calls nihilism. And when you get stuck in that situation, which is a phenomenon that society can do something about if it wanted, then you begin to blame yourself. Yeah. You see no way out. And then that's when you want to have this permanent solution to a more temporary situation. And so until we begin to manifest a different mindset that is about belonging and caring at higher levels, what Shinwright calls radical love, then our society is structured to continue to have that happen and continue to harm young people and as well as adults, but particularly this situation, young people, because it will not change the trauma that's persistent and the social toxins that young people and we walk through and breathe every single day. Right. And so I think that's how our society contributes to the numbers we're looking at. Yeah. And until we reframe that, tear some things down and build some different things, we're going to continue to see those numbers grow because racism's not going away. Sexism's not going away, and none of the other isms have gone away. And as a matter of fact, they're going to get worse if we're not careful.
I think Deacon Greg, you said that just magnificently. I think that was just really well said. I think unfortunately the pandemic really took away some of the protective things that we had in place, like the church. The fact that we had to close from March 2020 until more recently. That was really a protective thing. The way we were able to organize and do family was removed. We couldn't do funerals, we couldn't do weddings. All of the rituals and the organizing that we do for young people was removed.
Right.
So school, of course, was a huge socializing, sports, activities, all the things that protected young people, that gave them their sense of community and a place to be and to organize was removed from them. And so any child that was at risk to begin with, that had OCD, who was schizophrenic or we call it pre-morbid condition, any of them that was predisposed to that, lost all the protective environmental pieces that were there to protect them. And for Black youth especially, who are traumatized continuously, we really needed that protection that they didn't have. All of the teachers and social workers that they had access to were removed.
Right.
So the church, which is valuable has always been valuable to the Black community, was removed. So doing it online helps some, but it's never like face-to-face for a young person.
Sure.
So that was removed until now, more recently. Yeah. So we lost those. And so it really, that's how I believe we got to a suicide rate that is highest for Black youth from 5 to 12, which we've never seen before. But it wasn't like we had some special immunity to suicide. Right. Our children are still children. Right. But it became clear that we could have the same rates as anyone else, if not higher. Once you remove the Black church and removed all of the protection that schools and social workers gave to our children, boom, we saw what everyone else could do. And we had the same thing. So we need the same protections that all children need. And if you watch zebras in the wild, they put their old people and their young people in the middle of the pack, and all the adults surround them. And when that pack moves, and that's what we need to do. When you listen to young people's music, and I don't mean to put down hip hop, but what about hip hop protects our young people? It puts down women. It says kill and hurt and maim, and that's just what young people need to hear in the middle of a pandemic. Let's just kill and hurt each other. What about our culture says life and support? If we don't hear from the church, who and what in our culture says live and survive? Where is the survival and the health messages that our young people need to hear right now?
Right.
I don't know where it's coming from, but we need to create a zebra pack. We need to surround our young people with survival and thriving messages. And I'm not sure if the Black church doesn't do it, where are they going to get that message?
Right. And I think that lends itself to why it's so important for the church to have these conversations, but not just have the conversation and then go on about life. To have the conversation and then follow it up with action, right? To know that, and not just the church doing actionable steps, but parents actually bringing their kids to church. I didn't have an option whether I went to church or not. My mother said, it's Sunday, we're going to go to church. But one of the beautiful things that came out of that was the connection that I had with other adults, the connection that I had with other peers, the opportunity for me to have extracurricular without necessarily having to go out and get myself into trouble or get myself into something I had no business getting myself into because I was in church. And I think a lot of times we say, okay, well, nowadays we give kids the options on whether or not they come to church. But when you come to a church, especially a church like Macedonia, when you have a Dr. Boone and you have a Deacon Owens and you have some other professionals who are in the space who can interact with your child on a more frequent basis, they begin to pour into them. Right? They may be able to see one of these underlying symptoms that may be early detected because we have professionals here in church who interact with our kids on a day-to-day basis. And so I think, part of the program, especially the Haven program, as we continue to move forward, is to give kids the tools that they need to not, as we've said time and time again today, to not make permanent solutions from temporary problems, right? That our message consistently and continually has to be that if in fact you are dealing with mental illness and you are going through bouts of depression, that there are ways that we can support you and help you from a professional standpoint, but then we have to do our part as the church to continue to support. Continuing that conversation on the church and the impact that the church has. Blessed to be here at Macedonia. Wonderful facility, great land, 4 acres of land, as Pastor Emeritus Commentator always talks about. Got 4 acres, beautiful playground, wonderful congregants who come, who care. What are some things that we can do more as a church body, as a church community, to really have an impact, not just on youth who are dealing with mental illness, but our adults as well, to not forget them. But what can we be doing more on a more consistent basis to impact people in our congregation who deal with mental illness? Deacon Owens.
I think that you've indicated, and Dr. Pride-Boone, you have to talk about it. You have to talk about it courageously, to begin to destigmatize it and to begin to give people a different narrative about it, even different language about it. Because, calling somebody crazy is not helpful. They're acting crazy, or, the devil got them. That's not the language that's going to help us with this situation and circumstance. Right. So I think the more we do that, the more we have these kinds of opportunities, I think we'll be able to help our congregants be able to understand this differently and be more helpful about this. I think the Haven program that's coming to Macedonia in the next couple of weeks, we'll talk to Sidney Hankerson and others, which is help available for Valley Experiences Now, is what the acronym means, really is that opportunity to get the church better able to understand what these issues are, what mental illness really looks like and means, and then how we as a congregation can begin to help people as opposed to harm people, even though we're well-intended, right? So, people used to say, well, I'm gonna beat the devil out of you. That's not real helpful in terms of trying to deal with people who have real-time mental health problems. So I think that being open to that kind of opportunity and bringing the Haven program here is going to also add value to what we're trying to do to make us whole and healthy in terms of mind, body, and spirit, which is what you already talked about and what Pastor Emeritus Commentator always talks about, right? Yeah.
Dr. Boone?
I think I'm so grateful that you're bringing the Haven program here, that we'll be able to recognize the signs of depression. If someone, knowing the 9 signs of depression, recognizing someone's losing interest in things that they like, they start giving away their favorite things that they love, their music, their artwork. They're in their room all the time. They're losing weight. They're gaining weight. They have no energy. They're doing drugs. All of a sudden, they're with a different crowd. They're changing. Their grades are dropping. Recognizing they're not going to work. They're having trouble making ends meet. They lost their job. They're changing their physical health. They had a new diagnosis of chronic disease. They've gotten cancer. Anything that puts them at risk. Recognizing those signs, watching for sadness, gloominess, talks of suicide. Talking about suicide will not make someone suicidal. Recognizing when someone talks about taking their life or has had a risk for taking their life, if there's depression in the family, schizophrenia, any major psych diagnoses puts them at risk for suicide, and talking about depression, any of those things, having training, which you're going to bring to the church, will help us being able to recognize those signs and then taking action. And not being afraid to take action, not being afraid to protect the people you love is very important.
We come into church, and whether we know it or not, there's someone sitting in our congregation who's dealing with mental illness, right? Perhaps it's not talked about as much as it should. We're not having the intimate conversations as much as we should, but we know we are surrounded by people that we love and care for and appreciate, not just in church, but at home, at work, at the family reunion, at the barbecue, who are dealing with mental illness. How do we continue, and what advice would you give to that family member or that friend, someone that's connected to them, who are dealing with mental illness and they don't know how to navigate that? What advice would you give to them so that they can understand the mental illness but continue to love the person as they navigate life? Dr. Boone?
I think it's very important to show compassion, to not judge, to be as non-judgmental as possible, and to, if you can, to hug that person, to be there to listen. And I always try to remember that God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. So listen twice as much as you talk, as much as you can as possible. Because I talk too much.
No.
So, and again, be willing to take action. So to be able to point out, if you can, gently and lovingly say, I noticed that you're sleeping more. If you live with that person, or if they're friends, you're not willing to go out as much. I've noticed this, or I've not noticed that. And then if you can I help you make an appointment because often they're so sick, they don't have the energy to make the appointment. I know a really good counselor. Can I help you make an appointment? This is who I recommend. I've heard good things about this person. I'm thinking maybe you have some signs. Could you be depressed? Could you be so sad that it's really difficult to make an appointment? Can I help you with that? And sort of gently and lovingly suggest that I'm seeing some signs of this or that, whatever you're seeing.
Right.
But don't be afraid to talk about it. Don't be afraid to acknowledge it. But help them maybe sort out their feelings, because sometimes they don't have the words to say what they're feeling. Maybe help them with the language, the emotional language, to talk about what they may be not able to verbalize. And have you had thoughts of suicide? Have you thought about hurting yourself? Have those thoughts crossed your mind? Or if it did, when was the last time it crossed your mind? Do you have a plan? And if there's a plan, you have to take action. Stay with that person. You need to take them if you can, take them to the emergency room, or alert their next of kin so that you can take action.
Deacon Owens?
In addition to, again, co-signing what Dr. Pride-Boone has already said about this, let me remind both of us that being non-judgmental is one of the tenets of social work practice, right? So we ought to be able to do that intuitively and inherently because of what we claim to be in terms of social work professionals. But I think the other thing that's real important is to show higher levels of caring. And this notion of being able to touch, and Doctor, I'm going to defer to you in terms of what chemical gets released when you actually... Serotonin, which makes you feel better. So it's interesting that you come to church and you embrace, it's maybe one of the only places where that's encouraged the way that it is, right? And you walk away from the service and you get a wonderful sermon, particularly if you've done it. You end up, I had to do that. But you leave here having had fellowship. And you've also touched, now not so much during COVID, but that may have contributed to some of the anxiety and other things that we were feeling bad about because we couldn't get the benefits of the serotonin that we get a massive dose of with 200 people who are going to hug you and touch you, right? And so what the church offers is an opportunity to have that chemical released where you may not have it released any place else in any other institution that you go to. So we've got to value that. So when we can get back to that, it's helpful, not just spiritually, but in terms of our mental well-being, to let that be a part of our experience. And I think the other thing is to stay and be present. You know, all of the literature that you read about healing speaks about being, present, and that people will begin to trust and begin to look for relationship with you if you are going to be present. But if you are not going to be present, particularly when they're going through these trials and tribulations, if you don't find a way to connect with people and stay connected, even though they're acting differently than you might have seen them in the past, then we inherently begin to other them, don't we? Right? Well, I'm not comfortable. Maybe I'll just give it some room. And when maybe what they really need for us to do is to gather around them and put them in the middle of the herd and make sure that they know, we understand, we see. And first of all, we do have to understand, so that's important, right? We understand and we see, and we're not going to leave you alone. We're going to keep you connected with us because we're going to stay connected to you. Being connected can't be underestimated, right? That's one of the things that keeps us, so much about our humanity is to stay connected to one another. So those are things that I think we have to continue to lift up, and this is a unique place where you can get that for sure. So I think all those things kind of come to mind when you ask that question.
Reverend Kamathea talks about the ministry of presence.
Absolutely.
And
trademark. It's a trademark.
It's a trademark.
It's a trademark.
But that's where John, Luke, and I think Matthew talks about the demonic and what they were probably schizophrenics, where they're in the caves and they're acting up, and where where I think the fear of those who were probably mentally ill, and we tended to shun them almost like the lepers. And so how do you manage mental illness? And I think that's partly that history of the church shunning the mentally ill. So how do we manage? And part of our fear is, how do you pray for the mentally ill? We don't even have the language, and that maybe will come out of Haven, is how do you pray for mental illness? Because we've learned how, I think, to pray for diabetes, to pray for hypertension, to pray for cancer, but adding mental illness in our prayer list. Just being able to pray that prayer, schizophrenia, OCD, and depression, adding mental illness to our prayer list, almost novel for us.
And I think what comes out of conversations like this is to know that it's okay to pray for those.
Yes.
Right? That it's okay to know that you have someone who battles one of these underlying mental illnesses, and to pray that God would bless them and heal them and deliver them, because there is still miracles and wonders that happen every single day. But then to also understand that if in fact the illness is not removed from them, that doesn't make them any worse of a person. That you're still to love on them, and you're still to pray that they have joy and that they have peace, and to know that what they're dealing with isn't the totality of who they are.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So you're still calling them, asking if they want to go out to eat. You're still going for walks with them. You're still spending time with them and engaging them. And I think one of the things that has been missed, especially during the pandemic when we were forced to shut down, was, like you said, that human interaction, that touch, that care, that we have to get back into the flow of giving. And that's why I say, anyone watching, if you haven't been back to church, you need to come back to church and be in the space. I'm not coming against virtual folks, but there's something of being in the space, in the presence, to know that I'm going to see Deacon Owens and I'm going to see Dr. Boone and Pastor Meredith is going to give me a hug. You know, it gives you something to look forward to as you go throughout your week. And I think we've all got to do a better job of getting more in the habit of embracing one another.
But it is a difficult one with COVID-19 and monkeypox. So trying to figure out, and I will have to teach people how to do a handless hug and an elbow, because again, avoiding the hand. And I have to show you, because as a physician, I have not had COVID, and I touch patients all the time, and I have to teach you guys how to do it without using your fingers, because it's your fingers that get you in trouble. So we'll have to practice at a church.
I mean, COVID kind of shifted to endemic, and I was good. Dr. Boone said we were good, and then monkeypox popped up.
Monkeypox.
And I said, Dr. Boone, I got to give people hugs. You know,
So I got to show you guys how to do hugs and how to keep your fingers in, because it's your fingers that get you in trouble. So how we get, but you're right, it's that serotonin, and it's our hugging, and it's our fellowship and communing that has kept us safe. So how we learn to use our bodies and keep them safe, we're going to develop a Macedonia trademark. So we're going to develop that so we can stay safe and keep our serotonin levels high. So we're going to manage that.
Or I'm just going to give you a hug when Dr. Boone's not looking.
And stay COVID safe.
Stay COVID safe. If you haven't gotten vaccinated, get vaccinated.
So again, thank you both. What you've given us has been insightful, impactful. I know it's going to help people with their walk. It's going to help individuals who are dealing with mental illness feel seen and feel heard. What's some final thoughts you'd like to share? Resources, tips, anything that you feel the viewer should walk away with. Dr. Boone?
I think we need to know that as of July of this year, there's a new number. We can now dial 988, or you can text 988. There's also an email, 988lifeline.org. So we have a national new number. We don't have to do 911 for mental illness, for suicide prevention. So that's an important new number, and it's working. It appears to be working. So we can have a national mental health line that is very resourceful. So that's an important resource that we now have that will connect us up to real help. It's run by SAMHSA, so it's an important resource to have. So 988 is important.
Awesome. Deacon Owens?
I think just for us here at Macedonia, for our community specifically, but I think we'll probably branch out. If people will just keep an ear out for the Haven program, and we're looking for the opportunity to train young people to be peer support. So there'll be 3 sessions in September. And then there's a session for adults the first weekend, the first Saturday in October. And Dr. Sidney Hankerson, who is a Black psychiatrist who works in the Bronx, is going to be leading these sessions and training us. And you and I have already spoken to him. That's an opportunity for us here at Macedonia to begin to develop our capacity. So I'd ask people to just kind of stay mindful and listen for that and be a part of that if they can.
Awesome. Thank you both. You have been a blessing to us today on this beautiful, I don't think we could ask for better weather.
This is beautiful.
We've had a lot of planes fly over, but the weather,
conspiracy.
the weather has been great. So please know that you are appreciated and you are a blessing to us here in Macedonia.
As are you to us, Pastor. Thank you.
Thank you for doing this.
Have a great day, everyone. I just want to take the time to say thank you. Thank you for taking the time to sit down or drive or be at work, wherever you are, and view our series. Mental health is absolutely important. Understanding mental health illnesses are even more important. To understand the signs and the symptoms and what those around us are actually going through. As a church community, Macedonia, we have to be and continue to be committed to ministering to people beyond just Sunday morning, beyond just the spiritual. We have to minister to people holistically. We have to meet people where they are. So my commitment to you as your pastor is to continue to do that. I need your commitment to continue to step up to the plate and help those that we need. A big part of how we've been able to do this is through our 501c3, Higher Horizons Development Corp. This is the first initiative that we've taken on in partnership with OMH and Mount Sinai, the Haven program. But again, this is something that's just the beginning. So many people in the community that have need, whether it's giving food through our food pantry, whether it's providing counseling and grief services to those who are not members of Macedonia, we can continue to do our part to make our world a bigger place and a better place. As Pastor Emeritus commentary says, it's the ministry of presence that makes the difference. What else and what other sections of life do we need to be present in to continue to have impact? Have a great evening, and I look forward to seeing you real soon.